We've just got ourselves some awesome new family pets. Let me take you through how I made them the ultimate playground. I've spent the week working on a very special project, and I had to use all of my maker tools and skills, and that was to welcome 2 new additions to the family. Miniature goats are awesome, and by the end of this video, I imagine you'll probably want some, so let me bring you up to speed and show you what I made for them. In case you didn't know, I recently moved house, and I've made a couple of videos about moving and setting up my new makerspace, as well as the grind that was digging out underneath the house to set up a secret underground workshop. But this video is about using that lower level of grass, as it's one of the reasons we moved. This is Andy and this is Hamish, named after this pair of Aussie legends. We had these 2 miniature goats back in 2015, 2 houses ago. They were very affectionate, inquisitive, and very entertaining to have around, including sometimes breaking into buckets. Sometimes we would take them on walks around the block with our dogs, and all round they were just great pets that we loved having. Sadly, when we moved to our previous house, the yard was just too small and we had to sell them, but we have been waiting for an opportunity ever since. And finally, a week or so ago, that opportunity came and we went to pick up our new miniature goats. This little smoocher is named Bret, and this cheeky little shoelace eating fella is named Jemaine, and they get their names from this pair of Kiwi legends. After a couple of hours drive, we arrived home safely, and we carried our precious little goats out of the back of the car. As you would expect, they were unsure for the first few minutes, but it wasn't long until they started exploring their area and finding some things to chew on. So what do you need to prepare for miniature goats? Let's rewind a little and look at the prep. We're fortunate in that our block has a lot of bush out the back that the goats will eventually be able to explore. They will, however, be spending most of their time on this lower grass level, but thanks to relentless rainfall, it has turned to mud and that is no good for the goats' hooves. So the first thing we needed to have done was preparation of the area by laying down some plastic panels that are designed to trap gravel even on slopes. When the rain stops, there'll still be some pockets of grass, but regardless of the weather, the goats and us will be able to move around the yard to the main areas without getting mud all over ourselves. With the area prepared, it was time to get designing and making. Goats generally hate being stuck in the rain, so beyond their little house, I set up this undercover area that naturally needed a recliner. I'm planning for this project to be as cheap as possible, and that means using up all of the timber that I've hoarded in conjunction with a couple of these fence panels. They're really inexpensive for the size, and by simply putting some legs to raise one up, I would have the perfect bench. I pulled out all of the timber and sorted it by length, and then trimmed 8 similar pieces to have an identical length, which meant I was ready for assembly. My daughter was keen to help, and this was a nice chance for her to learn how to use some basic tools. We positioned the legs underneath the fence panel in the corners, and then she drilled, countersunk, and attempted to drive in some long screws from the fence panel into the top of the legs. We changed the center screw to a really long coach bolt for strength, repeated for all 8 legs, and Bret and Jemaine now had a perfect platform to recline on or to stalk the chickens. Maybe you're thinking there's no way that 3D printing and miniature goats mix, but it actually came in really handy. The other reason we needed the bench was to provide an undercover area for bottle feeding. These guys are young enough that they still need to be on the bottle for approximately another month. So with a pair of bottles needed 3 times a day, I wanted to make this as efficient as possible. So I jumped onto Onshape and made this set of accessories. The base will hold 2 baby bottles side by side. Then I've got this twin funnel that rests perfectly on top. It makes putting in 2 scoops of milk powder a mess-free proposition. The twin funnel can then be tapped to transfer the milk powder down into the bottle before each bottle is mixed, and the lids go on ready for feeding. Assuming the goats don't misjudge their jump up to the platform, and they both don't decide to go for the exact same bottle at the exact same time, this process was now more efficient. However, sometimes the goats got too excited eating and went to the toilet, and I found this brush to be the ideal tool for cleaning down the bench. I measured it and then modelled up this holder, printed it from black PLA, and cable tied my design to the underside of the undercover area. 3D printing is so perfect for these random objects. I've got a custom solution that holds the brush out of reach of the goats, yet is still convenient when I need it. What's next was my favourite part, creating a miniature goat playground. Back in the day, I made some simple play equipment for Hamish and Andy. It wasn't much, but goats do like to climb and explore, so they really appreciated it. It was particularly good in that it gave them a podium in which to wrestle and push each other off. With the help of my friend Dave, I made a list, put down some ideas, and crossed off some of the more absurd ones. This included a giant hamster wheel that I figured was just too ambitious and potentially a little bit dangerous, but other ideas were more realistic, such as a 3-height platform with the middle level acting as a swing suspended by chains. I ummed and ahed about an inverted Bosu ball, but I was absolutely certain about giving them a giant seesaw. First up, the platforms and swing, and that meant a trip to the hardware store to get some more coach bolts, U-bolts, chain, and various fittings. Using the same cheap fencing panels, I was able to drill a hole in the underside support and then screw in some stainless steel eyelets and prepare the eyelets for the chain with these links. Legs were then attached exactly like before, with a pilot hole drilled and then 2 really long coach bolts per leg. This was the simplest and easiest way I could think of to put this thing together, and it's also plenty strong. If it can support me jumping up and down on it, 2 miniature goats won't be an issue. As per my drawing, the second side platform was set up in exactly the same way, except with longer legs. And this took me to the point of having all of the pieces mocked into position. Just sitting on the back deck, the design was very sound, but in position on the sloping and unsteady ground, the structure was much more unstable. So as soon as I could get them off their new toy, I added a long brace to join the legs on one side, which made it impossible for the side platforms to collapse inwards, even with my weight on top. Immediately, the goats showed a lot of interest in climbing all over their new set, so I was calling this one a big success. Next up, a goat seesaw. I found this big old plank in the garage rafters at our old house and planned out a suitable base with the materials that I had. For this section, I employed a very simple woodworking technique called a halving joint. If you set a sliding miter saw to half depth, you can make a series of cuts one after each other, and after around 1 to 2 minutes, you'll have a completed piece. Other sections are prepared in exactly the same way, and if you were successful in your marking, measuring and cutting, the 2 pieces should slot together snugly. That's what I call my seesaw base. Next, I prepared 2 vertical posts by using a hole saw, slightly oversized so a metal pipe could rotate easily within, followed by some more pilot holes and coach bolts to join the frame elements together. Finally, the plank is prepared by drilling 4 holes in its surface ready for U-bolts. These go around the pipe underneath and then are torqued into place before the potentially dangerous ends are trimmed down flush. And that completed my seesaw. Also, I thought, because it was way too steep for the goats to get any traction on. So I removed the vertical posts, cut about half of them off, and with the very enthusiastic and persistent help of Bret, screwed the frame back together. With the help of some food, I introduced them to how it worked, and you'd think something like this would totally scare them, but they're completely unfazed, and it wasn't long until they were inspecting and playing on the seesaw without any of my encouragement. That's 2 from 2, I was totally on a roll. My next addition was really simple, a balance beam, made of a long piece of timber decking and another cross-halving joint to form the base on the other side. They were inquisitive but needed my assistance to get on and explore the first time, and initially I thought maybe the plank was a little too narrow as Jemaine seemed to be struggling. But it wasn't long before they were voluntarily jumping up and having their own jousting match like gladiators. I think this is actually their favourite part, and it's their main method to get up to the high platform. The other end of the balance beam still had an empty post, so I purchased a cheap Tough Dog chew toy and secured it with a bracket to the top of the post. I was expecting that maybe they would want to chew on it and wrestle for the privilege, but so far they seem to be way more interested in headbutting it. Hopefully they'll play with it more in time. I still had some leftover chain and materials, so why not add another element? One of the beams left over was long, and I didn't want to buy any more eyelets, so I simply put a large hole in it with a speedball. A hole like this on each end would still allow the chain to go through, suspending the beam in midair with some wobble. I could then drill some holes in the underside of one of the existing platforms for a coach bolt to go through and hold up the chain, and with the rest of the timber I made another halving joint and a simple frame that could be used to hold up the new advanced wobble beam. This new apparatus is pretty unsteady, even for them, so I think they're going to have to train and build up the amount of skill they need to negotiate it. In the meantime, they're still using it as a hurdle. Goats need to play and they need to be stimulated, so I'm pleased with what I've done so far because they seem to really enjoy it. My last items to make were some custom name tags. So I modeled up this simple piece in Onshape, milled them out of 3mm aluminium plate using the Carvera CNC. That gave me my 2 blank tags ready for some graphics. I didn't want them to be generic, so therefore I included some imagery and used the vector trace option in Lightburn to generate some black and white graphics. There's a nice trick you can do where you spray on some dry moly lubricant, let it dry for an hour, and then laser etch over the top. Isopropyl alcohol will then remove the excess spray, leaving behind your graphics etched into the metal. It's a pity I didn't quite get these straight, but they're still completely bespoke name tags. The dog collars I got for them were way too big, so I'm going to have to drill some extra holes until they grow into them. Beyond that, however, they have no problems at all wearing them, and after filming this, I'll take them off and etch in our phone number and address on the back just in case. And that is how I spent my week creating a series of custom designs for our miniature goats. And in case you didn't realize it, they are awesome pets. Miniature goats as pets are probably still considered unusual, but really they are awesome companions. They are incredibly entertaining to watch, and you'll marvel at just how agile they are. They are social animals, so you need to have at least 2, but that will provide them with opportunities to troll each other and joust. I also think they're very cute, and they remain so as they get older. Their food is clean and cheap to buy, and even their poo isn't particularly messy and makes great fertilizer for your garden. They're just like dogs when it comes to cuddling and affection, and they easily surpass cats when it comes to getting in your way and claiming the items that you're currently using. And when it comes to their ability to surprise you, they're really like nothing else. For instance, Bret is obsessed with chewing cords on collars, and every time you think that you're safe, he will sneak up and start to have a nibble. We do and always will love our dogs to bits, but I can't tell you how happy we are to have miniature goats back as part of the family.
I had such a fun time filming and editing this video. Hopefully you enjoyed watching it. If you have any questions, get them down in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy making for miniature goats.
G'day, it's Michael again. If you like the video, then please click like. If you want to see more content like this in future, click subscribe and make sure you click on the bell to receive every notification. If you really want to support the channel and see exclusive content, become a patron. Visit my Patreon page. See you next time.